Welcome to Chapter 5 lecture, Motivation and Personality. Motivation! Motivation is defined as the needs or desires that energize and direct our behavior in pursuit of a specific goal. And we are motivated by our biological drives every day. And a drive is basically a state of physiological arousal, so it's embodied, it's what you feel within, that motivates an organism to satisfy a need. So when we're hungry, we eat. When we're tired, we'll sleep. And when we feel anxiety, we are motivated to address the source of that anxiety so that it goes away. So we strive to maintain what is known as homeostasis, a state of physiological balance. And when we are actually out of balance, we start to feel tension. And we start to develop this drive to restore this state of physiological balance. So motivation is very complex, and it's not simple. It's very physiological as well as mental. And in order to understand why people do the things they do and why you do the things that you do, you need a level of self-awareness, a deeper understanding of who you are, your personality, the things that you believe about yourself, and an understanding of what motivates other people, a level of social awareness. According to drive reduction theory, motivation will be extinguished once we've taken action that eliminates a drive and restores the body to a state of homeostasis. So if we look at two primary drives, hunger and thirst, when we feel hungry, physiologically, we feel maybe the tightening of our stomachs, and we also feel rumbling within our stomachs that's communicating to us that we're hungry. And with thirst, we might feel a sore throat, we might have a dry throat, or you might be feeling weak and tired. And to satisfy those drives, right, to satisfy hunger, we eat. And to satisfy the thirst, we then consume a beverage. And once those drives have been satisfied, our body goes back to physiological balance. But it does so just for a short period of time, because we're going to feel hungry again and we're going to feel thirsty again. So drive reduction theory just shows that, our motivations are dependent on those drives, and our motivations aren't always constant, right? They're temporary. We're also motivated to pursue physical pleasure in a state of optimum arousal to maintain homeostasis or physiological balance. And the level of optimal arousal varies from person to person and is pretty much based on what an individual can tolerate. But it's also determined by the task the person is performing. So Yerkes Dodson law shows how physiological arousal influences quality of performance. And when an individual is working on a difficult task, let's say you're writing an essay or you're working on a quiz, they'll require low physiological arousal, so you'll want to eliminate distractions from your environment and be in a very quiet place so that you can focus on the difficult task. Now, when an individual is working on an easier task, let's say a task that's repetitive, they'll seek to increase physiological arousal by perhaps listening to music or turning on the television. And in doing so, they're going to perform at a higher level. Sigmund Freud argued that people do things that make them feel good. And this is known as the pleasure principle. An example of this is after you enjoy a meal and you no longer feel full, you've reached biological homeostasis. You still reach for that second slice of cake for the pure enjoyment and pleasure of indulging in that cake. Now, when you're indulging in that cake, you're releasing a neurotransmitter known as endorphins. And these decrease feelings of pain and stress and increase feelings of pleasure. So directly at that moment while you're eating the cake, endorphins are going off in your brain. And that's reinforcing this pleasurable activity so that in the future, you're hardwiring yourself to enjoy indulging in cake. And you're more likely to do so. Prior to indulging in that cake, your brain is releasing dopamine, called the motivation neurotransmitter. And this motivates you to pursue pleasurable activities. Biological sources of motivation, such as hunger, thirst, sleep, and sex, which are essential to our survival, push us to do things. Whereas external sources of motivation pull us by way of an incentive towards a goal or an activity. Extrinsic motivation is the desire to perform or engage in an activity to achieve a specific outcome. And this might entail getting good grades, earning money, earning praise, or even avoiding punishment. And from what we've learned from conditioning, classical and operant conditioning, is that it helps us associate rewards and motivations. So if we look at an example of pleasure, classical conditioning helps us form an association between a stimulus and that pleasurable feeling. Whereas operant conditioning helps us to understand that repeating a desired behavior that has led to the stimulus will allow for us to experience that pleasurable activity in the future. Let's look at the example of two students highly motivated to earn good grades. The first student, their incentive of earning good grades is to earn teacher approval. So anytime the teacher is approving of that student during the studying process and when they earn good grades, that's a positive reinforcement. And that reinforcer increases the likelihood that the student will study again in the future and earn good grades in the future. The other student, their incentive of earning good grades is to avoid punishment and to avoid teacher disapproval. So when the teacher disapproval is removed after earning a good grade and after studying, that is known as a negative reinforcer, which also increases the likelihood that the student will study more in the future and earn good grades in the future. A popular metaphor referring to carrots and sticks comes from the idea that you can motivate a donkey to walk in one of two ways. If you want someone to do something, you offer an incentive or a carrot. And if they don't do it, you threaten them with punishment or a stick. And this helps to explain behaviorism and that people will be motivated by incentives. And the effectiveness of an incentive is determined by how much value an individual places on that incentive. And occasionally, an incentive that's offered can actually decrease motivation. So in order to understand that, we first have to understand how psychological needs influence our motivation. To understand how psychological needs influence motivation, we can examine Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Maslow believed that we're not simply motivated by biology or environmental forces, but we have a desire to improve ourselves and the world around us, and we do so through our own free will. Maslow's hierarchy of needs pyramid over here on the right, shows which needs humans desire to attain and the order in which we go about attaining them. So we start at the very bottom of the pyramid and we work our way to the top. At the very bottom of the pyramid are our most basic needs, our physiological needs, and we work to attain things such as food, water, shelter, and sleep, which are essential for our survival. And Maslow called these deficiency needs because they're only important to us when they're lacking. And once we satisfy these needs, we're motivated to seek out higher level needs. So from physiological needs, we move up to safety and security. And this includes security of health, property, employment, family, and social stability. From there, love and belonging, where we seek out friendships, connections, and intimacy. Then, esteem needs, where we're working on confidence, achievement, gaining respect from others. From there, we move into cognitive needs, pursuing knowledge and understanding of the world around us. From here, aesthetic needs, pursuit of beauty and creativity, self-actualization, achieving one's full potential, and transcendence, where we're seeking something beyond ourselves and we're making connections with humanity. Transcendence, self-actualization, and aesthetic needs, Maslow argued, are considered growth needs. And he shared that our motivation to experience these after we've fulfilled them only increases. So they're never satisfied. And we continuously set new goals and try to improve ourselves when we reach these top 3 stages of the pyramid. Self-determination is the ability to manage your own life. And similar to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, the self-determination theory argues that people have an innate need to grow, master challenges, and feel connected to others. And there are 3 psychological needs involved in self-determination, which include competence, relatedness, and autonomy. Applying knowledge of self-determination theory can be incredibly beneficial to anyone in a management position. Not only does it help to improve employee morale, but it increases employee retention and overall job satisfaction. So let's explore the psychological need of competence. Competence refers to our need to feel like we're good at things and can develop skills to be good. We're more motivated to do a task when we feel like we can do it, and we're less motivated when we're facing a challenge or task that seems impossible to overcome. So you want to make sure that the tasks that your employees are provided with are both engaging and challenging. You want to be sure that employees have tasks where they seek and provide help to one another. They're leaning on one another. And in doing so, they're not only learning from one another and they're enhancing their own competence of the work they're doing, they're building these stronger relationships with people at work that'll be beneficial to them in the long run, as well as the organization. Relatedness refers to our need to feel like we belong and have purpose. We're more motivated when we believe what we're doing matters, and we're less motivated when an outcome might harm others or result in exclusion from a group. You want your employees to understand not only how their role is meaningful to them and how it relates to their own life, but how they're contributing to the larger community. And you want to create a sense of belonging by inviting everybody and their ideas and diversity of thought to the table at group meetings and at social events so that everybody is heard. And in doing so, you're creating an environment in which people feel like they matter, that the work they do is contributing to larger goals, and that they belong and they fit in at the organization they're working for. Autonomy refers to our need to feel like we're in control of our behaviors and their outcomes. We're more motivated when we get a say in how we achieve our goals, and we're less motivated when we feel like our actions and behaviors are being controlled. This is why it's important that employees are provided with choices, that perhaps they get to choose what projects they want to contribute to, or they get to brainstorm and share their ideas of what projects could be done in the future. Allowing employees independence not only produces personal and professional growth, but it allows employees to learn from one another, and it's a very creative process in and of itself, because that person doesn't feel controlled by the organization. They feel as though their ideas matter. Intrinsic motivation does not require any external incentives. Rather, the individual gains a sense of satisfaction by purely engaging in the task itself and completing the task. So when we're engaged in intrinsically motivated behavior, we feel confident, in control, and full of passion and meaning. So to experience intrinsic motivation is to experience self-determination. Now, individuals who engage in intrinsic motivation describe it as engaging in play rather than in work. You get into a state of flow where you're focused and zoned in on the task at hand, and everything else kind of disappears. A good example of intrinsic motivation is a computer programmer who stays late after work because they're having fun developing the coding for a new program. We've reviewed how we're motivated by biological needs and how psychological needs influence our motivations. But what helps us accomplish new tasks and master new skills? Well, goals. Goals help facilitate achievement, and they help us break down larger objectives into smaller milestones, contextualize our progress, and get through hard times. There are 4 types of goals that are involved in achievement motivation. Outcome goals are goals that involve comparing your results to the results of others. They're all about competition, and because of this, they're naturally motivating, but they're very difficult to control. Some examples of outcome goals include winning a race, earning the highest grade in the course, or becoming the top performing salesperson within your district. Performance goals involve achieving a specific standard for your own performance. And these types of goals are not dependent on comparing your results against the results of others. Some examples include running a 10K within 50 minutes, earning an A on your exam, or closing deals on 10 accounts within 1 quarter. Process goals involve carefully paying attention to the skills or techniques you hope to learn or master. Examples of this include incorporating speed training into your running routine 1 day each week, creating practice exams to help you study, or creating a consistent schedule for your company's social media marketing campaign. Mastery goals involve improving and eventually mastering a task, skill, or concept. These forms of goals involve persisting through difficult times and asking for help when it's needed. These are long-term, big-picture goals that require more time and dedication than the other three forms of goals I've mentioned. Examples of mastery goals include running and placing in a big city marathon, writing and publishing an academic dissertation, or taking your company public. Research has found that we're most motivated when we're pursuing more than one type of goal at once. For example, as a student, you're pursuing outcome goals and mastery goals. And your mastery goals help you to reach out and ask questions when you have them, while your outcome goals help you to persist through long and boring study sessions. An important aspect of motivation is self-efficacy. Self-efficacy is our beliefs about how well we'll be able to perform a task. And research has found that if we believe we'll be able to perform a task well, we end up being more motivated along the journey of completing that task, and we end up doing pretty well. Whereas if we believe we'll perform a task poorly, we typically give up, and we do so relatively quickly. Albert Bandura shared that self-efficacy for completion of a task is influenced by 4 sources, and these are previous experiences, physiological arousal, vicarious experiences, and social persuasion. One of the most powerful influences on self-efficacy are our past experiences. And we glean insight from past successes and failures as we develop beliefs about how we will perform on similar tasks in the future. Physiological arousal is also very important because too much or too little stimulation can impact performance. We need just the right amount of stimulation in order to do well on a task. Vicarious experiences play a deep role as well. We gain confidence from seeing other people perform well at tasks. And if he can do it, I can do it. And social persuasion is also very important because positive reinforcement, feedback, and encouragement help us stay motivated as we pursue the task at hand. Mindset matters. Now, mindset matters as it pertains to staying motivated and achieving our goals in life. And a psychologist by the name of Carol DeWitt from Stanford University identified 2 kinds of mindsets: fixed mindset and growth mindset. She argued that individuals with a growth mindset believe they have the power to grow and to change, and that these individuals understand that growth takes effort, growth takes time, and growth is a process. There's 3 things that each of us can do to develop a growth mindset, and the first thing we can do is offer counter arguments to our negative thoughts, to our fixed mindset thoughts. So if you don't believe that you'll pass an assignment because you're not as smart as other students, which is a fixed mindset, counter argue that and say, this assignment is difficult. I'm going to put in additional effort with this assignment this term, and I'm going to work with academic support to help me be successful with this assignment. That's more of a growth mindset. So challenge those negative thoughts in that fixed mindset and offer yourself, be kind to yourself, offer yourself some guidance in how you're going to approach something in order for it to work out. The next thing each of us can do is add a yet to our doubts. So rather than say, I don't understand this assignment, say, I don't understand this assignment yet. That shows that you're going to be working on this assignment and working towards the goal of pursuing it, rather than saying, I don't understand this assignment and just give up. Growth is a process. Lastly, we can embrace mistakes. We have to recognize mistakes as a learning process. So nobody is perfect. We are all perfectly imperfect. So each mistake that comes along, we learn from it, we grow from it, and we improve from it. Grit plays a major role in helping us to attain long-term goals. Psychologist Angela Lee Duckworth from the University of Pennsylvania defined grit as passion and perseverance for very long-term goals. And she shared that this involved deep interest, a sense of purpose, a growth mindset, and deliberate practice. Deliberate practice is intentional practice. It's practicing with 100% of our effort and using feedback as we practice to refine our skills. So grit is living life like it's a marathon, not a sprint. It helps us as we pursue those very long-term goals where we envision ourselves 5 to 10 years from now. To better understand why we do the things that we do, we first have to take a step back and explore who we are. The self is the internal core of who we are, and this is a schema or mental category we hold, and it is not fixed. The self changes throughout our lifetime. So who we are today is completely different than who we were 10 years ago. Our self-concept consists of 3 components, all of which are intertwined: self-image, self-esteem, and ideal self. Our self-image is the way we see ourselves, and it's very biased, but it can be more accurate if we receive accurate feedback from those around us related to our strengths and weaknesses and how people are perceiving us. Self-esteem is how we feel about ourselves. And again, we rely on the feedback from others as it pertains to our physical appearance, our behaviors, and our abilities. We also look to social media and how that influences us as we see similar demographics of ourselves represented in the media. It impacts how we perceive how we should be. So it's important when exploring self-esteem to look at all factors that influence it. So it's not just those, in our social circles. It's those people representing our demographics in the media that have a true impact on how we feel about ourselves, whether we're truly aware of that or not. And the final component is ideal self. And our ideal self is who we wish to be in the future, who we desire to become. And in order to have a healthy ideal self, we have to have a healthy self-image, right? So a more accurate understanding of who we are helps us to develop into the better version we see ourselves 10 or 20 years from today. As we grow to understand ourselves and discover who we are, we rely heavily on the feedback from others as it pertains to our personality and behaviors. And personality is defined as the observable ways in which we behave and engage with the world and with others. When understanding personality, we examine what are known as traits. Personality traits are defined as enduring patterns of behavior and dispositions that are central to the concept of personality. So, trait theory examines personality by naming and categorizing patterns of behavior. If we look at this image to the right, we see 4 different traits. And each individual is very unique in their traits that make up their personality. Stable refers to emotional stability, and it's how calm and how emotionally stable and consistent in mood an individual is. Neurotic, on the other hand, is emotional instability, and their mood typically is very variable and negative. An introvert is someone who is more quiet, shy, solitary. They don't crave out social situations, and they prefer being by themselves most of the time. Extroverts are very sociable. They're bold and they're very outgoing individuals. These are individuals who crave social situations and they thrive when around other people. The most reliable and stable personality test available today is the Big 5 personality test. The Big 5 traits are predictive of a wide variety of behaviors. So significant correlations have been found between individuals' trait test scores and their observable behaviors. So let's explore them. The trait of openness is how open an individual is to new ideas and experiences. An individual who scores high in this metric has a drive and hunger for knowledge, and they sometimes can be a very creative and artistic individual. An individual who scores low in this metric is typically very traditional and strict, and they prefer to stay in their comfort zone. The trait of conscientiousness is how goal-directed, persistent, and organized an individual is. An individual who scores high in this metric has a deeper awareness of how their actions affect others, and they take care to organize their lives and keep to a schedule. An individual who scores low in this metric typically struggles with procrastination, and they find it challenging to keep to deadlines, maintain friendships, and follow a schedule. The trait of extroversion is how energized an individual is by the outside world. Those who rank high in extroversion are typically very energetic and engaged in social situations. They love being around other people, and they find energy from others. Those who rank low in this metric are typically more quiet and withdrawn, and social situations leave them feeling tired and drained. The trait of agreeableness is how much an individual puts others' interests and needs ahead of their own. An individual who ranks high in agreeableness seeks out ways to understand and help other people. An individual who ranks low in agreeableness struggles to invest in helping others, and they often come across as unpleasant and antisocial. The trait of neuroticism is how sensitive an individual is to stress and negative emotional triggers. An individual who ranks high in neuroticism is typically very anxious, irritable, and experiences drastic mood swings. An individual who ranks low in neuroticism is typically more relaxed, less prone to stress, and overall more emotionally stable. It's important to understand that our personalities aren't defined by one trait. Rather, our personalities are a result of all 5 of these traits working hand in hand. And our genes and our environment play a role in our personality. And it's also important to know, right, we score on a spectrum within each of these traits. Right? So it's on a spectrum. Just because you're higher in extroversion doesn't mean you've scored the highest. You're not the most extroverted person. And because of that, no 2 human beings will ever share the same personality. Sigmund Freud developed the psychodynamic theory of personality, and he claimed that our personality is the observable result of the inner conflict between our unconscious urges, which are battling against our conscious thoughts. And this theory is this idea that our unconscious feelings are shaping our behaviors, and thus our personality. To help people understand the human mind, Freud used an iceberg. And he shared that what's just above the waterline, or the tip of the iceberg, is our conscious mind. It's our conscious thoughts and behaviors, what we're aware of. And the unconscious mind is so vast and big, it's everything below the waterline. And these are things that we are fully unaware of, that drive our thinking and our behaviors. Freud proposed that the personality is made up of 3 psychic structures: the id, ego, and superego. The id is entirely about primitive instincts and self-gratification. It operates completely outside of our conscious awareness, and its grip is in this pleasure principle, where we're seeking out feelings of pleasure and gratification while avoiding pain. The ego operates off of the reality principle. It recognizes that we can't have all of our desires met the moment we experience them, so it directs and controls the impulses of the id. And to help us better understand how the id and ego work together, the id is like the horse, right? It has power. Our instincts have power. But our ego is the person riding the horse, because our ego provides us with direction and control. The superego operates in accordance with intricate social rules and expectations that we're consciously aware of as we navigate the world. And it flattens the impulses of our id while judging the direction of the ego. So it's constantly trying to perfect behavior. So if the id is our instincts, the ego is reality, the superego is the idealized self. Freud believed that the id and superego are constantly tugging at the ego, which is the middle ground between satisfaction that results from the id and guilt and shame that result from the superego. The actions the ego takes in response to this struggle is what forms personality. And when the ego becomes overwhelmed by this conflict, it deploys a set of defense mechanisms that help to reduce the anxiety of the struggle. Some defense mechanisms that can be deployed by the ego include denial, Refusal to believe or acknowledge a cause of one's anxiety. An example of this, a person continues to spend money on expensive items despite being thousands of dollars in credit card debt. Projection, attributing one's own unacceptable qualities to others. A cheating husband accuses his wife of having an affair. Regression, returning to an earlier stage of development during a period of anxiety. A 9-year-old begins wetting the bed after being placed in a foster home. Displacement, shifting anxious thoughts or urges away from their original target and onto another person or situation. An example, angry about being laid off from her job, a woman harasses workers at a restaurant. She's displacing her anger from being laid off at work onto workers at a restaurant. Rationalization, creating a self-serving excuse for unacceptable or shameful behavior. An abusive parent claims that her misbehaving children need to be taught a lesson. Reaction formation, transforming an anxious thought or urge into its opposite. A daughter hates her mom's new boyfriend, yet she acts extra nice around him. And sublimation, channeling unacceptable urges into socially acceptable behaviors. So instead of continuing an argument with her wife, a woman decides to clean her entire house. Freud suggested that the development of personality begins when children seek pleasure from sexually sensitive parts of their bodies, known as erogenous zones. And Freud argued that any behavior related to survival was sexual. So the acts of eating, urination, and defecation are all pleasurable because they're related to survival. Freud went on to argue that the libido, or what is known as the energy associated with adult sexual behavior, also drives pleasure that children experience while feeding, while controlling their bowel movements, and while discovering their bodies. And that if these acts were not pleasurable, children wouldn't do it, and thus they wouldn't survive until adulthood. Freud believed that there are several stages of psychosexual development, and that children's behaviors and feelings change depending on which stage they are in. So in this table, we have the stages of psychosexual development, and from birth to 18 months, the oral stage of psychosexual development shares that libido derives pleasure from actions of the mouth. So children would be sucking and biting at this stage. Between 2 and 3 years old, the anal stage of psychosexual development is when the libido derives pleasure from exerting control over the body during urination and bowel movements. Between the ages of 3 and 5 years old is the phallic stage. Here the libido derives pleasure from self-stimulation and acting out gender stereotypes. Next, the latency stage is children enter this at age 6 through puberty. The libido is suppressed or sublimated into achievements at school or in sports. And from puberty through adolescence and adulthood, we have this genital stage of psychosexual development, where the libido derives pleasure from mature sexual activity and contributing to society. According to Freud, there is a direct link between childhood fixations and the development of adult personality. Freud argued If there's any type of trauma or difficulty a child experiences during the oral phase of psychosexual development, for example, it would result in an adult having oral fixations. So they might engage in smoking, nail biting, and overeating. If there's troubles during the anal stage of psychosexual development, it might result in an adult having an anal retentive personality, which is having control over themselves and of others, or anal repulsive personality, where they're very messy, lazy, and they lack complete control. Difficulties that result in the phallic stage of psychosexual development can result in the Oedipus complex for males and the Electra complex for females. And these complexes are repressed sexual desires for the opposite sex parents and disdain for the same-sex parent. Thank you for reviewing the lecture. Should you have any questions, please post to the General Questions discussion forum. And have a great day.